Well, I worked with Amit on Resistance. I love comedies, and I like the authenticity of the script in that Amit was brought up above a restaurant, which still runs on the Jadoo Road, on the Belgrave Road, and it just felt like he knew what he was talking about. So it was a comedy based in reality, a situation he understood, and it had some sort of grit to it, but it was also, some great lines. So perfect combination for me. I enjoyed the script's humour, and I enjoyed its emotional punch as well. I think with all good writing, what I would call a sort of American comedy writing, is it's funny, but it keeps grounding you again every now and again in people's real emotions. So the ending in the hospital always makes me cry, and then you get flicked out again into a comedy moment. So it does that thing that really good comedy writing like The Simpsons does every now and again. It makes you mostly laugh, but resets your laugh button every now and again with a good grounding of emotional drama. The more I'm here, the more vital I think it is that we filmed it in Leicester, because not only is it a story completely and utterly focused on one place, the Belgrave Road, but walking down the Belgrave Road, we couldn't have recreated that really anywhere else. Not the kind of true authenticity of the Golden Mile, where every fourth shop's a jewellery shop, the others are restaurants or sari shops. That would have been a very difficult atmosphere to recreate anywhere, I think. Perhaps rather naively, I thought this would be an easier film than Resistance, because Resistance we had animals, snow, children, period film and everything. I think the main challenges have been the design. It has a lot of sets, by which I mean sort of either exterior locations, which are quite simple, or sort of restaurants, and we've had to recondition restaurants. We've had to build a restaurant in a studio. We've had to turn one kitchen into another kitchen very, very quickly. We've had lots of extras at our Holly scene. We've had to build a thing we've never done before, or I've never done before, which is almost like a TV show curry competition. And those design elements have been very challenging, but we've had a fantastic team. Adrian Smith leads a brilliant design team, but it's been a bigger film than I thought it would be. Fundamentally, because it's a great fun movie. It's a great fun piece of entertainment, but with a heart and with energy, and I think with a sort of fundamental truth about families, love them and hate them, that we can all identify with. I mean, there were stories that we've constantly picked up on the Belgrave Road about families that have done very much what Amit has written in the script, but I think all of us come from families where there's the mad crazy uncle or the cousin that you don't speak to anymore for reasons which no one quite remembers the details of. And I think that humour he's captured brilliantly. I think Jadoo represents everyday family life because it's about the tiny things that drive people nuts about each other. Families who are sort of required to be together very often break up, but families that are required to be together and then go into business together, family businesses, restaurants, shops, whatever it might be, you've got the added tension of money and ethos about how the business is to be run, which can very often cause catastrophic family falling out. I think that's been done very well with the script. The Leicester community has been, I think, really surprised that Jadoo is actually here and is here for a reason. They keep thinking it's a Bollywood film, and I explain it's a British film. They keep saying, are you here for a particular location? I'm having to persuade them that no, we're here because it's set in Leicester and specifically on the Belgrave Road. And as soon as they've grasped that, they have been both sort of very generous with locations, but also with themselves. And almost all our major extra scenes have been peopled by families and mums, dads and children who actually live on or off the Belgrave Road. So we rebuilt Raj's restaurant in terms of the geography, wanting a place that was, the two frontages were opposite each other on the Belgrave Road. We could only find one real restaurant behind the frontage, and the other frontage had to be built. So we built it in the other factory for Sanjay Foods. And it's amazing because what you see is a platform of wood upon which flats start to be built, and then a ceiling, and then the decoration that goes into it. And then when you finally walk into that set, it is a restaurant. I mean, to all intents and purposes, it could open the next day, apart from it has no outside. It's really a bizarre feeling. When the crew started to come together, especially the head of department, I totaled up that between them they have over 300 years of top flight professional experience. And my main worry about bringing such a experienced crew together was not, obviously, they all joined in the kind of terms and conditions of the film, and they've all been brilliant at being there for Amit. And it's only a second film, and I think he's hugely appreciated the depth of experience. And my main worry as a producer was that they would feel that the film was too tightly resourced, that they would be used to something that was much bigger, where there was more transport, there was more services, there was more infrastructure to the film. And I have to say that not one person has sort of rolled their eyes or thought, why isn't this here? Because it would be on a bigger film. They've all sort of done it, really elegantly and used the resources that we've got very tightly, and organised themselves in such a way that I don't think we've ever suffered that moment of thinking, this is not Troy. The main highlight for me was holding back extras at one point, and I got involved in a conversation with an elderly gentleman from the Belgrave Road who was slightly deaf, and I was trying to explain to him who was making the film, and our line has been, it's Mrs. Gupta's son from the Chart House, and he couldn't really hear me, so I said, it's the Chart House, Mrs. Gupta's son, and all of a sudden he stopped and he looked at me and he went, it's being directed by Charlton Heston's son, and I thought that really defined the humour of the film and some of the relationships that you have to form very quickly on the Belgrave Road. So we've got a brilliant camera team, and our camera operator Rob Hart happens to be able to operate and also has a Steadicam kit. Amit has used Rob and his Steadicam ability very judiciously, mostly for street shots and shots where laying a track would have been simply impossible, rather than using it in a tricksy way. For Holly, we also had a crane, quite a simple crane, but one that could get us sort of scale by coming up above the crowd, and I think that will cut together brilliantly, especially as the paint flies in the air. So we have it in that week. We also filmed the setup, the exterior establishing shots for the Kings of Curry competition, which is based in this building in Leicester called the Curve, which is this fantastic steel and glass structure that curves, as the title might imply, around a corner. And we use that, I think, very effectively, both interior and exterior, for the sort of setting the scale of the Kings of Curry competition. So week one, we were in Jaggie's house, which is Kulvinder Gear's house, with Harvey Verdi as his wife, and they have their two wonderful and very funny children. And it's always the test of any film, really, is that you go into a relatively small domestic location, everyone finds their feet and their place on the floor, and it was just a very good feeling because it was calm, and sets where there's sort of hysterical laughter or a lot of sort of overbearing energy can be kind of exhausting, and people basically are doing that because they're displacing their nervousness into sort of loud humour. And we didn't have any of that. When people who came on set said, it was calm and it was focused. So that was very hopeful. And we shot the first day on schedule, and then we shot the second day on schedule. And at that point, I think we found our rhythm, and it was sort of important, I think, that we did that. So week two started with, at last, us getting our Indian star, Harish Patel, who had sort of been locked in India, in Mumbai, because his visa was late in being issued. And that made the end of week one quite tense. But we got him, we fitted him, and we shot in his house for the beginning of the week, which went brilliantly. It was great to have someone, that we were all anticipating so much turn up, who was just so funny and so lovely. And then it ended up with the kind of biggest scene in the film in terms of its logistical challenges, which was recreating Holly in Cossington Park with 250 local extras and a drumming band and a dancing troupe, which again was just fantastic when that paint went up. and people started thrashing about, and we had our crane and our Steadicam shot, and it was brilliant. So week 3 we were mostly in Jaggie's kitchen and Jaggie's restaurant, which was found in this place called Exotica, which was directly opposite Amit's mum's restaurant, but on a first floor. And it was a kind of weird discovery. Amit said it was there. We're all a bit sceptical because it was on the first floor, but it was an abandoned restaurant. And I mean that exactly as I say it. Someone had literally put the soy sauce bottle down and walked out. So everything was in it. It wasn't exactly clean, but nor was it filthy. It was just kind of abandoned. So we went in there, cleared it out, cleaned it, and then put Jaggie's and Raj's kitchen in there. And we sort of altered the kind of look and the geography of the kitchen, but made it quite similar, as if would have wanted the same kitchen that they always had after they split. And then we used the actual the main body of the restaurant, which was soundproofed extraordinarily, like a studio. We used the interior of it for Jaggie's restaurant, which was a very big space, and we could use a portion of it. And it gave us almost kind of a studio space behind it to put the gear in and the crew whilst we filmed there. Week 4, we recreated Raj's restaurant inside an empty factory unit just off the Belgrave Road, which again gave us the space that we needed to put props and do our construction in, but also allowed us to build a set inside it in a relatively quiet and secluded spot, but we'd had parking outside it. And so Adrian and his team built this fantastic interior there, which was a very flexible space for us to kind of cover a great deal of ground in a short period of time. So week 5, we have been at Vinod's flat with Adil Akhtar doing his fantastic turn as Vinod, and then we spend the rest of the week doing the Kings of Curry competition, the exterior of which we did at the Curve inside Leicester City itself, and the interior of which is from the People Centre, which is a community centre behind the Belgrave Road, which has got a perfectly sized theatre for us to sort of stage our major Kings of Curry competition. And that's a challenge because it's got to look like a real Kings of Curry competition and yet be flexible enough to film the dramatic climax of the movie when the brothers have come together and then split apart and then finally reconcile. So when I describe Jadoo and try and make it a genre, I call it a food and family comedy. And comedy is the most important thing, but food is the uniting issue. The brothers split up over a recipe, they come together for a curry competition, and all through the film, key scenes are people preparing food for each other, feeding each other food, and sort of focusing their key moments in life through food. And at the end of the climax of the film, Shalini actually feeds Mark, if you like, almost a kind of family album of food. You know, this recipe was done by my aunt, this one was my great-grandmother who came over from India. All these things are put together as a sort of an emotional roadmap for him to follow as they go off to get married together. And so food, you know, is absolutely vital theme of the film. And you know, we've had to spend a great deal of our energy on getting it right. When we put the plan for the film together, Adrian Smith, the designer, was very clear right from the outset that food, he kept calling it like it's a separate element. It's like a separate department. So we have obviously a design department, we have a camera department, but he said, you know, we need someone who will be totally focused and only focused on making the food look good, and even making bad food look good in a bad way. They have a funny scene at a restaurant where the food isn't right, and which Shalini makes a comment about. So we've had Nicole and her team preparing that, and they have their own schedule. They have prep days, and then they have performance days when the food has to arrive. It not only has to look good, but it also has to taste good, because actors have to put it in their mouth time and time again when frankly they've probably had too much of it, and still go, wow, that tastes delicious, and you can read that on their face. And she does that, to camera whenever we say turn over, a fresh dish is there that's been prepared off set and brought on at the right temperature and looking terrific. And so Adrian was, of course, as he always is, absolutely right that had to be totally believable. And it's meant that we've also had, in terms of preparing, when the brothers prepare and try and practice their menus for the curry competition, we've had fantastic tracking shots across ingredients which just make you hungry. And when they, at one point someone makes a an aubergine curry, and it actually does make you hungry as you watch the rushes. So it has actually worked. The art department starts, with Adrian as the designer, and Adrian is also a painter, and he paints all the key moments, the sets and the key moments of the film, and shows Amit those not only as a kind of visual look, but as a colour palette. I mean, people talk about this a lot, but it is actually important because the colours that Adrian chooses are sort of themes for characters and themes also for storylines, which everyone else responds to. Roger in the camera department, and Nigel and Maynir in the costume and makeup, they take those colours very, very seriously. And then, Adrian hands those basic and sometimes very detailed plans to Sam Stokes, who draws them up as our supervising art director and does technical drawings and budgets and breaks them down. And Shona, our props buyer, goes out and buys the props for those moments. And it goes down their sort of chain of command until it hits the set, at which point, Kat, our standby art director, and Owen and Mark, our standby props, are sort of setting them to camera and repeating them again and again and again as necessary. And so it's a kind of wonderful chain machine that starts churning with Adrian and Sam 2 or 3 sets ahead of us. So we're currently filming Vinod's flat, and Adrian and Sam are now in the People Centre setting up and making sure that the Kings of Curry competition is ready for us for the rest of the week. So Eddie Hamilton actually cut Amit's first short film, and he's cut a film for me before. We made the decision right from the start to have him on site all the time, not only sort of building and taking us through our rushes every night, but also assembling the film as we go. So he could sit down with Amit and say, I think this moment is missing. Occasionally, very occasionally, I think you should redo this moment because we either need more of it or we need it from a different angle. And it means that when we get to the edit, we're not going to have holes. And that's the worst thing, is when you sit down and go, we have no more money to go back, we can't reassemble this team, and you want to be able to come out of the experience knowing that you have your film. And so it's been brilliant having him here.